Robert Bolton, political science professor at Fairmont State University, friend of the show. Robert, good morning. How are you?
Hi, Dave. It's always good to be back on. I'm doing well today.
What did you make of the debate last night?
Well, I definitely thought it was entertaining. As the candidates themselves and the moderators acknowledged, obviously the significant absence of Donald Trump was felt. But even with his absence, you did see some rhetorical fireworks between some of the candidates. I think probably the two who engaged in the most fierce verbal combat were Governor Chris Christie and the new candidate, Vivek Ramaswamy. And it was certainly interesting to hear what they had to say. It was also somewhat surprising, or at least it was for me, to hear how many of the Republican candidates were supportive of Mike Pence's position concerning the issue over the January 6th vote counting in the Electoral College. That actually surprised me a great deal.
How so? Why? Because that seems to me like it would be a no-brainer to be supportive of Pence. But why would that surprise you?
I think ultimately many of these candidates are trying to keep their feet in two different positions when it comes to, well, we are obviously running for president. We believe that we're the best candidate, but at the same time, we want to portray sympathy for former President Donald Trump. And certainly within the Republican Party base, obviously Donald Trump is leading in the polls, and I think a significant probably majority, but certainly at least a significant minority of Republican Party voters feel that Donald Trump was treated unfairly in the 2020 election and are actually in opposition to Mike Pence's position on whether or not the electoral vote should have been counted on January 6, 2021.
Talking to Robert Bolton, political science professor at Fairmont State University. Did any of the candidates separate themselves, in your opinion?
Well, I think the two that certainly separated themselves, or the audience separated them, were Governor Chris Christie and Governor Asa Hutchinson of Arkansas. When you were seeing the introductions for each of the candidates, I thought it was very telling that those two governors were the only ones that were generally booed by the audience. One person who I think certainly did distinguish themselves and will probably see a bump in their poll numbers is Vivek Ramaswamy. I felt that he was willing to engage in verbal combat with the other candidates and was certainly willing to stake out some positions that were I would consider more confrontational than many of the other candidates.
The thing about Vivek, Robert, that came across to me, and maybe this is old guy syndrome sneaking in on me here, but he felt like, have you ever had that job where they hire the hotshot college kid to be your boss for the job that you've been doing for years, that you know inside and out? Now he's going to come in and tell you that you've been doing it wrong and here's the right way to do it, and you just kind of want to slap him? That's kind of how I felt. I just kind of wanted to slap him last night.
Well, and Chris Christie at one point did specifically call him out concerning that.
The ChatGPT comment, right?
Yeah, ChatGPT. I mean, Governor Christie supporter opposed him. He certainly is someone who can engage in some pretty witty repartee. But yeah, Vivek is 38 years old. I'm 34 years old now. I could tell you certainly if I was running for president, that would be an extremely daunting task. And Vivek certainly cast the appearance that he was very confident. One thing that did surprise me, or I shouldn't say surprise me, but did strike my interest is what was concerning his proposal to slash significant parts of the federal budget concerning Department of Education, Department of Labor, many of the other government agencies currently in existence. But by and large, none of the Republican candidates talked about one of the single biggest line items in the federal budget, which is defense spending or Social Security, or at least if they touched on it, it was only a momentary passing comment. But yeah, I think Vivek certainly, when he said that everyone else on the stage that evening was beholden to paid interest, that was the one moment I noticed that many of his comments received boos from the audience, and I certainly think generated some ill will on his part among the other candidates. And it'll be interesting to see whoever does ultimately win the nomination, whether or not they would make any type of cabinet position to offer to him after those comments.
Robert Bolton joining us, political science professor at Fairmont State University. Let's pivot to former President Donald Trump, who was not there last night, but is scheduled to surrender to authorities in Georgia later today. What should we expect?
Well, by and large, these arraignments are very closely organized, and given Donald Trump's high-profile position as a former president, you can rest assured that the Secret Service has already scoped out the area and made sure that there's going to be a security clearance before he would ever step foot in any courthouse or jail. Donald Trump is being charged with 13 counts, primarily under the RICO Act. That's the most notable offense that he's alleged to have violated under Title 16 of the Georgia Code. What you're going to see happen is he'll appear before the judge. He will have his bond set at $200,000. This will be the first of the 4 cases he's currently under indictment for where he will actually have to post a cash bond. The others have been a personal recognizance bond up to this point. So that is something that is especially surprising. He's also going to be booked and processed where he will be fingerprinted. His information will be entered into their database, and you're likely going to see the release of a mugshot later today or possibly tomorrow.
It ought to be interesting, Robert. Mugshot of a former president.
Yes.
Don't know. Hopefully we never see that ever again, and it's going to be interesting. I just don't know where to go from there. It's weird. It's weird times.
Yeah, it certainly is. I've always felt since the beginning of Donald Trump's legal woes after he left the presidency that the Georgia case was actually the one where he was facing the greatest peril. When you look at the other 3 cases, one of them is in state court, the New York hush money case. And most legal experts, or at least among the commentary I've read, have regarded that as a relatively weak case. Even the district attorney who's prosecuting it, Alvin Bragg, initially was opposed to using this particular legal theory to charge Donald Trump. The 2 federal cases concerning the classified documents and the events related to January 6th are both being pursued in federal court with the special prosecutor Jack Smith. And in those cases, if Donald Trump is able to delay the trials until after the election, and that's a big if, but if he's able to delay them or delay any sentencing until after the election, and he is able to be sworn in on January 20th, 2025, he can order his attorney general to dismiss any pending prosecution. And if there's a conviction already in place, theoretically, Donald Trump could pardon himself. There's a lot of debate on whether or not a president has that power to pardon themselves, but it's certainly something where there have been multiple law review articles written on the issue, and there's no clear-cut answer. Georgia, on the other hand, is a state prosecution. Right. So even if Donald Trump is elected president, Georgia state authorities, this Fulton County prosecutor, Ms. Willis, can go forward with the case. And finally, the last thing to remember of that is if he is convicted under Georgia law, with a few limited exceptions, a defendant is not eligible for a pardon until 5 years after their criminal sentence has been discharged. So Donald Trump couldn't go to Governor Kemp, for example, and say, hey, would you please pardon me? Right. That wouldn't be something that would be likely to happen under current Georgia state law.
And I believe they have the governor can't even just issue that. They have a panel down there as well. So we're going to it's going to be interesting to watch this all play out.